My fiance's phone lit up during our movie night. The message read, "Don't forget tomorrow, same room, same time." I pressed play. She couldn't breathe. We had been planning a quiet night at home. Nothing fancy, just the two of us, a pizza on the coffee table, and a movie we had both been putting off for weeks. Nights like these always felt like a little reset button in our relationship, a reminder that despite work stress and family obligations, we still had a comfortable rhythm together. At least that's what I thought. Halfway through the movie, I noticed her phone light up on the armrest. It wasn't unusual. She was always getting messages from coworkers, group chats, her sister. But this one caught my eye before I could look away. It wasn't a name that flashed, just a number, and the text preview said enough to freeze me where I sat. "Don't forget tomorrow. Same room, same time." My first reaction wasn't confusion. It wasn't denial. It was a surge of heat that went straight to my chest. I didn't even think about playing it cool. I picked up the phone, turned it toward her, and asked what the hell this was supposed to mean. The movie continued playing in the background, but neither of us heard a single sound from it. She froze instantly, her face draining of color. Her lips parted, but no words came out at first. She reached for the phone, but I pulled it back, holding it just out of reach. I told her not to bother pretending it was nothing. The wording was clear, too specific to be a misunderstanding. I wanted to know whose number it was, what same room meant, and why she was acting like a thief caught in the act. She finally found her voice, and it came out shaky. She said it was a work thing. Some boring, routine scheduling from a client who preferred to meet outside the office. A half-hearted explanation, stitched together in seconds, and it collapsed under its own weight before she even finished saying it. I asked her what kind of client texts from a personal number at night, reminding her to meet at the same room. I asked if she expected me to believe her job now involved secret hotel appointments. Her expression changed then. It shifted from panic to anger, like she'd rather go on the offensive than stay cornered. She snapped that I was paranoid, that I always assumed the worst. She said it was just work, and if I couldn't trust her, then maybe I didn't deserve to be with her at all. That lit a fuse I hadn't known I was holding. I told her not to turn this around, not to gaslight me when the evidence was glowing on her phone screen. I demanded an actual answer, not excuses. The air between us grew heavy, the kind of silence that isn't silence at all, but a storm waiting to break. She stood up abruptly, her pizza plate clattering to the floor, and shouted that she didn't have to justify every message that came through her phone. I told her that a fiancé absolutely did if the message in question looked like a rendezvous confirmation. The argument spiraled fast, neither of us backing down. The quiet movie night we had planned dissolved into raised voices, accusations, and pacing across the living room. Finally, she grabbed her phone out of my hand with a sharp tug. She locked herself in the bedroom, leaving me sitting on the couch, staring at the dark TV screen. My heart was hammering, not just with anger, but with something worse, certainty. Deep down I knew. There was no logical explanation for that message, no innocent angle. She was hiding something, and the fight only confirmed it. But I also realized something in those moments alone in the living room. If I ended things right there, she'd deny it forever. She'd spin the story to her family, to mine, to mutual friends, painting me as jealous and controlling. I needed more than a suspicious text. I needed proof. The rest of that night dragged like a slow bleed. I heard her crying in the bedroom, though whether it was guilt or just fear of getting caught, I couldn't tell. I didn't go in. I lay down on the couch, staring at the ceiling, replaying every strange detail from the last few months. The sudden late nights at work. The new clothes she said she bought on sale, but never wore around me. The cash withdrawals she brushed off as splitting bills with coworkers. They all aligned now into a picture I didn't want to see, but couldn't unsee. I kept thinking back to one night 2 weeks earlier when she had come home past midnight. She had claimed she stayed late to finish a project. When I asked why her clothes smelled faintly of cologne, she laughed it off, saying it was just perfume samples at the office. I had believed her then, or maybe I had forced myself to. Now it all resurfaced in sharp, undeniable focus. At around 2 in the morning, I finally stood up from the couch and went to the bedroom. The light was off, but I could see her curled up with the blankets pulled tight. She didn't move when I opened the door. For a second, I thought about saying something, demanding one last time that she tell the truth. But I shut the door again without a word. I didn't need more lies tonight. Instead, I went back to the couch and made a decision. The fight had happened. The line was already crossed. From here on out, I wasn't going to wait for her to confess. I was going to find out everything myself. That was the moment the relationship shifted. The trust that had been built over years was gone, replaced by suspicion and cold calculation. And yet, I felt a strange calm beneath the fury. If she wanted to live a double life, then I would make sure her mask was ripped away piece by piece. The next morning, she acted as if nothing had happened. She brewed coffee, made small talk about the weather, asked what time I had to be at work. I watched her closely, noticing the way her hands shook when she lifted her mug, the way she avoided looking me directly in the eye. I didn't bring up the message again. She probably thought I was giving her a chance to smooth things over, that I was letting it slide. But in my head, plans were already forming. I was going to trace that number. I was going to find out where same room, same time led. And when I had everything, I was going to make sure she couldn't lie her way out of it. For now, though, I played along. I let her believe she still had control. She had no idea that the fight the night before wasn't the end of it. It was just the beginning. For the next 2 days, I kept up the act. I woke up, went to work, came home, ate dinner with her, and asked nothing about the message. She must have thought I'd cooled off, or that she had scared me into dropping it during our fight. The tension hadn't vanished, though. It hovered in the air like static, and every glance between us carried the weight of suspicion. But I wasn't idle. The number from that text burned in my mind. I had saved it in my phone that same night when she was locked in the bedroom. On the second morning after our fight, during my lunch break, I stepped outside and dialed it. It rang twice before a voice answered, polite but professional. Reception, good afternoon. It wasn't her office. It wasn't a client. It was a hotel. I hung up without another word. My stomach twisted as the truth solidified into something heavy and undeniable. The message had been exactly what it looked like, an arranged meeting. And if she had done it once, there was no reason to believe it had been the only time. I paced outside the building for 10 minutes before forcing myself to breathe. Anger wanted me to storm home right then, confront her again, and demand answers. But I knew how that would go. She'd deny, twist, and accuse me of paranoia again. This time, I needed something she couldn't dismiss. That night, while she showered, I checked her purse. It wasn't the proudest moment of my life, but pride had already been stripped away the second I saw that text. In a side pocket, folded neatly, I found a hotel keycard with the same logo I'd heard on the phone earlier. That was confirmation. Not a theory, not paranoia. Evidence. I slipped the card back where I found it and shut her bag carefully. My hands shook as I zipped it, both from fury and from a strange exhilaration. The pieces were coming together. The next evening, she announced she had to stay late at work. The timing was too perfect, too convenient, and I wasn't going to miss the chance. I left the house 15 minutes after she did, taking my car, but parking it a block away from where she usually left hers. I watched from a distance as she pulled up to the hotel. She didn't hesitate. She walked inside confidently, like someone who'd been there before. No looking around nervously, no second thoughts. She belonged to that place in a way she never belonged to our living room anymore. I stayed in the car for nearly half an hour, debating whether to go in. The temptation was enormous, to march through those doors, find the room, and catch her in the act. But I knew better. Once again, the image of her spinning the story flashed through my head. She'd claim it was innocent, claim I misinterpreted. Without proof, I'd be the jealous fiancé who overreacted. So instead, I made note of the time. I took a photo of her car in the lot. I even walked by the reception desk casually, pretending to check my phone, and caught the reflection of the staff handing her a room key in the polished countertop. That was enough for now. I didn't see who she met that night, but I saw her leave 2 hours later, her hair slightly undone, her clothes not quite as crisp as when she walked in. She didn't spot me. I followed her car back home, my jaw clenched so tight it ached. When she walked through the door, she carried herself with forced cheer, asking if I'd eaten dinner yet. I nodded, keeping my expression blank, and told her I'd ordered takeout earlier. She kissed my cheek, almost out of obligation, and disappeared into the bedroom. I sat there on the couch, staring at nothing. The image of her walking through that hotel door replayed endlessly. It wasn't just the act that destroyed me, but the ease with which she did it. Like she'd done it before. Like it was second nature. The following day, I dug deeper. I checked our bank account and found withdrawals that matched the nights she claimed to be working late. Always in similar amounts, always in cash. She wasn't charging anything directly, but she was careful enough to cover her tracks. That made me wonder how many times I'd already paid indirectly for her double life. I also noticed she had recently ordered new lingerie, items that had never once been for me. They were still tucked in the back of her closet, tags removed, clearly worn. The more I looked, the more I realized I had been living beside a stranger. By the end of the week, I felt like I had mapped out the entire skeleton of her betrayal. But one piece was missing. Who? I needed to see him, to understand who she thought was worth throwing away our engagement for. The next Friday, she gave me another excuse about staying late. I didn't argue. I waited until she left, then followed her again. Same hotel, same casual stride to the reception desk. But this time, I stayed long enough to see a man arrive 10 minutes later. He was older than me, dressed in a sharp suit, the kind you don't wear unless you're used to being noticed. He carried himself with the confidence of someone who had money and power, the kind of presence that explained why she might have been drawn to him. My fiancée greeted him in the lobby, her face lighting up in a way I hadn't seen in months. They walked to the elevator together, side by side, almost like a couple who had been doing this for years. I clenched my fists so hard my nails dug into my palms. My first instinct was to confront them right there, in front of everyone. But again, I forced myself to wait. One confrontation had already ended with her stonewalling me. This time, I needed her cornered with proof she couldn't deny. I left the hotel before they came down. I couldn't stand to see more. I drove aimlessly for an hour, my mind churning. The older man's presence had changed everything. This wasn't some random fling. This was deliberate, calculated. She was building something with him behind my back. Back home, she returned later than usual, slipping into bed as if nothing had happened. She smelled faintly of cologne, the same kind I'd noticed once before. She turned away from me, her breathing steadying into sleep. I stared at the ceiling again, the same way I had a week earlier, except now I had faces and places to go with the betrayal. The puzzle wasn't just suspicion anymore. It was real. I decided that night I wasn't going to leave it at this. I would find out who this man really was, what role he played in her double life, and how deep her betrayal went. She thought I was blind, but she was wrong. I was watching her more closely than she ever realized. And I had only just started. The older man from the hotel lobby stayed on my mind for days. He wasn't just anyone. He had presence, authority, and he clearly had money. My fiancée had always been ambitious, but I thought her ambition was for us, for building a life together. Now it seemed she had redirected that drive into something far darker, something selfish. But even with what I'd seen, I didn't feel like I had the full picture. It was too polished, too practiced. She hadn't shown an ounce of hesitation, not a flicker of guilt in her expression when she greeted him. That level of comfort didn't come from a single affair. It felt rehearsed, like she had been juggling this routine for longer than I had realized. The following weekend, she told me she was going out with coworkers. Dinner and drinks, nothing unusual. I didn't let on that I was suspicious. I said I had errands to run, kissed her goodbye, and waited until she left. Then I followed. This time, her destination wasn't the hotel. She drove across town to a quiet restaurant, not the kind you'd take a group of coworkers to, but the kind of place you go when you want privacy. I stayed parked across the street, angled just enough to see through the large front windows. She wasn't alone for long. A different man walked in, younger than the one I'd seen at the hotel, closer to my age. He smiled when he saw her, and she lit up again, that same glow I hadn't seen directed at me in months. They hugged in the entryway, casual but intimate, like two people who had shared more than a meal together. They sat in a corner booth, leaning close, laughing softly. I could only watch from a distance, but their body language spoke clearly. Whatever they had wasn't professional. My chest tightened as realization set in. The hotel man wasn't her only secret. She was balancing multiple men, multiple lies, multiple lives. And I was the fool sitting at home, planning a wedding with someone who clearly had no intention of being faithful. I sat there for over an hour, watching her laugh and touch his arm like it was the most natural thing in the world. When they finally left, I tailed them at a safe distance. They didn't go to the hotel. Instead, they drove to his apartment complex. She followed him inside, glancing around once to make sure no one was watching. But she didn't see me parked across the street, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles went white. I waited. An hour passed, then another. Midnight came and went. She didn't come out. At 2 a.m, I finally drove home, my mind numb and buzzing at the same time. When she finally returned the next day, she had the nerve to bring me coffee, smiling like nothing had happened. I took it, drank it, and thanked her, but inside, I was boiling. Every act of kindness now felt like a cover, a performance. She wasn't just lying. She was living an entire second existence. Over the next week, I dedicated myself to untangling her web. I checked bank statements, cross-referenced dates, and even went through her planner when she left it on the kitchen counter. I noticed little symbols and shorthand codes next to certain dates, ones that aligned perfectly with the nights she'd been out. She thought she was clever, but patterns reveal themselves eventually. One night, I followed her again, certain she'd meet one of the two men I already knew about. But what I discovered made my blood run cold. She went back to the hotel, but the man she met this time wasn't the older businessman or the younger guy from the restaurant. It was someone else entirely. A third man. I stood in the shadows of the parking lot, my heart hammering as I watched her greet him. He was more casual, dressed in jeans and a hoodie, nothing like the others. They laughed, kissed quickly, and disappeared into the hotel together. The sheer audacity of it broke something in me. She wasn't just cheating. She was orchestrating an entire network of affairs, compartmentalizing each one so carefully that none of them, not even I, knew about the others. The next day, I did some digging online. It didn't take long to find out who the older businessman was. His name was Stephen. Married, 2 kids, high-ranking executive at a finance firm. The younger man from the restaurant was Brandon, single, worked in marketing. The third man, the casual one, took longer, but eventually, through social media connections and a bit of patience, I discovered his name was Kyle. He was a freelancer, scraping by but clearly smitten with her. She had tailored herself to each of them, I realized. With Stephen, she played the sophisticated partner, polished and charming. With Brandon, she was the fun-loving companion, always laughing and playful. With Kyle, she became the supportive muse, encouraging his projects, making him feel important. And with me, I was the anchor, the stable home, the mask of normalcy that allowed her to juggle the rest. The full scope of her deception made my skin crawl. How many lies had she told? How many nights had she sat across from me, smiling, while planning her next rendezvous with someone else? One evening, after she claimed another late meeting, I sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at the engagement ring I had saved up for months to buy. It suddenly felt like a prop in a play I hadn't auditioned for. I thought about throwing it across the room, about smashing it with a hammer just to hear the metal crack. But I stopped myself. Rage wasn't going to win here. Precision would. I decided then and there that I wasn't going to let this continue in the shadows. I was going to drag it all into the light, not just for me, but for everyone she was deceiving. Stephen's wife deserved to know. Brandon deserved to know he wasn't her only secret. Kyle deserved to know he wasn't special. And most of all, our families deserved to know the truth before a wedding tied me permanently to her mess. But timing mattered. If I rushed, she'd find a way to spin it, to frame me as unstable or vindictive. I needed everything lined up perfectly. Dates, photos, proof that couldn't be brushed off as coincidence. I began compiling a folder. I printed screenshots of her messages, bank withdrawals, and the planner codes. I added photos I'd taken of her entering the hotel, of her with Brandon at the restaurant, of her greeting Kyle. I even tracked down Stephen's wife's social media, noting details I could use to contact her when the time came. The more I built the folder, the calmer I felt. Each page was another layer of armor, another guarantee that when the truth came out, it wouldn't be my word against hers. It would be undeniable. Meanwhile, I kept playing my part. I smiled, went to work, made dinner, and nodded when she told me about her long nights. She had no idea the ground beneath her was already crumbling. One night, as I added another set of receipts to the folder, I thought about how different things had become since our first fight about the text. Back then, I still half hoped it was all a misunderstanding. Now, I knew better. This wasn't a crack in the relationship. This was a demolition, and I was no longer clinging to the wreckage. I was preparing to burn it down completely. The final piece fell into place when she accidentally left her phone unlocked on the counter one evening. A message popped up from Stephen, confirming their next meeting. I took a photo of it instantly, heart racing. This time, I didn't confront her. I didn't even flinch. I slipped the phone back where she left it and went on chopping vegetables for dinner. Inside, though, I knew the endgame had arrived. The folder was ready. The evidence was overwhelming. And the perfect opportunity was just ahead, our engagement dinner. I pictured it already. Her family gathered, glasses raised, smiles wide. She'd be basking in their admiration, pretending to be the loyal fiancée. And then I'd place the folder on the table, slide it across to her father, and let the truth bleed out in front of everyone. For once, she wouldn't have room to lie, and she'd finally see what it felt like to choke on secrets. The engagement dinner had been planned weeks in advance, long before the text message, long before the hotel keycard and the late-night stakeouts. Back when I still believed the future we were building was real. Canceling it would have raised suspicion, and part of me wanted her to feel confident walking in, to believe she still had control right up until the moment the ground vanished beneath her. The night arrived sooner than I expected. She spent the day getting her hair done, carefully choosing a dress, and applying makeup with meticulous precision. Watching her prepare was surreal. To anyone else, she looked like a woman in love, glowing with excitement about her upcoming marriage. To me, she looked like an actress rehearsing a role she'd mastered through countless performances. I dressed quietly, kept my expression neutral, and carried the folder in my jacket. Each page inside was a nail in the coffin of her carefully constructed life. I had rehearsed this moment in my head for days, going over every possible reaction she might have, every excuse she might throw out. None of them would matter. The evidence was overwhelming. The dinner was held at a private room in a nice restaurant downtown. Her parents were already seated when we arrived, along with her younger brother and a few close friends. My parents couldn't make it, which, in hindsight, was a blessing. I didn't need them there to witness the explosion I was about to set off. We exchanged greetings, smiles, hugs. Her mother complimented her dress, her father shook my hand warmly, and her brother joked about finally getting a decent brother-in-law. I laughed along, but my mind was focused on the folder pressing against my side. The first half hour passed in a blur of appetizers, small talk, and polite laughter. I played my role well, listening attentively, smiling when appropriate. She sat beside me, her hand occasionally brushing mine, her laughter ringing a little too loud, like she wanted to prove to everyone how perfect everything was. When the main course arrived, I knew it was time. My heart hammered in my chest, but my hands were steady as I reached into my jacket and pulled out the folder. I placed it on the table, sliding it across toward her father. Conversation faltered, then stopped completely. All eyes turned to me. I told them I had something important to share, something that couldn't wait until after the wedding. I explained, calmly but firmly, that for weeks I had been uncovering the truth about her double life. That she wasn't just unfaithful once, but had been juggling multiple affairs while planning a future with me. Her face drained of color, and she reached for the folder, but her father's hand was faster. He opened it, eyes scanning the first page, a printed screenshot of the message that had started it all. His expression shifted from confusion to shock to anger as he flipped through the contents. Photos of her entering the hotel, receipts, planner entries, bank withdrawals, more photos of her with different men. Her mother gasped, covering her mouth with her hand. Her brother muttered something under his breath, his face red with embarrassment and rage. Friends exchanged glances, whispers spreading around the table like wildfire. She tried to speak, her voice trembling, claiming it wasn't what it looked like, that I was twisting things, that it was all innocent. But with every denial, another page turned, another photo revealed, another shred of proof stacked against her. The folder had been built to withstand her lies, and now it did its job flawlessly. Her father finally looked up, his face grim, and asked if it was true. She stammered, unable to form a coherent excuse. Silence filled the room, thick and suffocating. I didn't gloat. I didn't raise my voice. I simply stood, thanked everyone for coming, and said I could no longer marry someone who had treated me like a placeholder while running a web of deceit behind my back. Then I left the folder on the table for them to finish. The walk out of the restaurant felt surreal, like stepping out of a theater after the final scene of a play. The noise behind me blurred into a hum, her voice rising, begging her parents to listen, to believe her. But I knew they wouldn't. Not after seeing what I had shown them. Outside, the air was crisp, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. I got into my car, drove home, and sat in silence for a long time, staring at the ring box on the counter. I didn't feel relief, not yet. Just a hollow ache where the future we'd planned used to sit. The fallout began almost immediately. Her father called me the next morning, apologizing for what had happened, thanking me for showing them before it was too late. He said they had confronted her that night, and she had finally broken down, admitting to some of it, but still trying to minimize the scope. Her mother was devastated, her brother furious. Within days, word spread beyond the family. Stephen's wife received an anonymous package with copies of the hotel photos and receipts. Brandon got a message through social media with screenshots of her planner, showing he wasn't the only one. Kyle discovered the truth when I left a printed photo of her with Stephen in his mailbox. The reactions were swift and brutal. Stephen's wife filed for divorce, citing infidelity and using the evidence I provided as leverage. Brandon cut her off immediately, humiliated that he had been strung along as one of many. Kyle, heartbroken and betrayed, confronted her in public, causing a scene that left her red-faced and scrambling for explanations. Her carefully balanced web collapsed in a matter of days. The men she had juggled turned on her, her family withdrew support, and friends distanced themselves to avoid the drama. The reputation she had cultivated, the image of being a loyal fiancé and ambitious partner, crumbled into dust. As for me, I closed our joint accounts, canceled the wedding venue, and returned the ring. I moved my things into a new apartment, leaving her with nothing but the echoes of her lies. The last time I saw her was a week later, when she showed up at my door, eyes red from crying, begging me to listen. She tried to say it was a mistake, that she loved me, that none of the others meant anything. I told her it didn't matter. Love wasn't measured in apologies after betrayal. It was measured in actions, in choices, and she had made hers over and over again. She left that night without another word, and I never opened the door to her again. The consequences rippled further than I expected. Stephen lost credibility at his firm when whispers of the affair reached colleagues. Brandon avoided dating for months, burned by the betrayal. Kyle posted a long, raw message online about being manipulated, earning sympathy but also fueling the spread of her downfall. And her family? They didn't disown her completely, but the disappointment lingered like a shadow. Every family gathering became a reminder of the night I laid the folder on the table. She had embarrassed them publicly, and that kind of stain doesn't wash out easily. I focused on rebuilding my own life. It wasn't easy. Trust was a fragile thing now, and the memory of her double life haunted me for a long time. But there was a strange comfort in knowing I hadn't let it drag on forever, that I had faced it head-on and cut it out before it could consume me. Months later, when I looked back on that night at the restaurant, I realized something important. The folder, the evidence, the exposure, it wasn't about revenge. It was about truth, about refusing to let lies dictate my life any longer. She had thought she could live in shadows, juggling roles without consequence. But shadows vanish when the light hits them, and I had made sure every corner of her deception was exposed. That was the end of her story in my life, and the beginning of mine without her. And that's the story. If you're still here, that means you're one of us. So go ahead, hit that subscribe button. I drop new chaos every single day, and trust me, tomorrow's story, it's even worse than this one.